The night I died the first time was the same night my sister became a billionaire's wife. The memory returns to me sometimes in fragments, like broken glass catching light music echoing across the ballroom. The glittering chandeliers reflected in polished marble floors. The scent of expensive perfume and champagne thick in the air, while hundreds of guests applauded a marriage they thought was romantic destiny. To everyone watching, the scene looked like the climax of a modern fairy tale. The powerful young billionaire Daniel Hart, standing tall in his tailored suit, smiling confidently as he slipped a diamond ring onto the finger of the bride in white, my younger sister, Vanessa. Cameras flashed. Reporters whispered about the fortune joining two families. Socialites congratulated themselves for witnessing history. And standing quietly at the back of the room, barely noticed by anyone, was me, the older sister who was supposed to be standing in Vanessa's place. After all, Daniel had proposed to me first. Months earlier he had come to our house with flowers and a polite smile, explaining that he admired my intelligence and my ambition, that he believed we could build something extraordinary together. Everyone had expected me to accept immediately. He was rich, brilliant, handsome, the kind of man people described as a once-in-a-generation opportunity. But something about the way he spoke had unsettled me, the cold calculation hidden beneath his charm like steel beneath velvet. I refused him politely, thinking the story would end there. Instead, Vanessa stepped forward the very next day and eagerly accepted the proposal I had rejected, smiling sweetly as if she had simply claimed a prize I had foolishly thrown away. The wedding happened quickly after that, and by the end of the night I was dead. It happened on the drive home from the reception. When the rain began falling so suddenly, the highway lights blurred into long streaks of gold across the windshield. My parents were arguing in the front seats, my mother furious that I had embarrassed the family by rejecting Daniel first, my father insisting I should have at least pretended to support my sister's happiness. Their voices rose and fell like distant thunder while I sat silently in the back seat, staring at the glowing skyline ahead of us, and wondering whether I had truly made the right decision. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe Daniel really was as good as everyone believed. Maybe Vanessa would live the life of luxury and influence people had promised her. That was the last thought I had before the truck came roaring through the intersection and slammed into the side of our car with a force that tore the world apart in a scream of metal and glass. For a moment there was nothing but blinding white light and the taste of blood in my mouth. Then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes again, sunlight streamed through a familiar bedroom window. For several seconds I lay perfectly still, staring at the ceiling fan slowly turning above me, feeling the strange weightlessness of someone who has just returned from somewhere they were never supposed to leave. My body felt younger, stronger. The ache of exhaustion I had carried for years was gone, replaced by a restless energy that made my heart beat faster. Slowly, almost afraid to confirm what my instincts already knew, I reached for the phone beside my bed and checked the date. The numbers on the screen made my breath catch. 3 years earlier. 3 entire years before Daniel Hart would ever walk through our front door with that charming smile and calculated proposal. 3 years before Vanessa would marry him. 3 years before the rain-soaked highway where my first life ended. I sat up slowly, my mind spinning as memories from the future rushed back like a flood breaking through a cracked dam. I remembered everything, not just my own death, but the years that followed Vanessa's wedding. The endless scandals that slowly destroyed Daniel's empire. The lawsuits, the financial manipulation, the quiet rumors of corruption that spread through the business world like wildfire. And most of all, I remembered Vanessa's face the last time I saw her alive in that first life. Pale, exhausted, standing outside a courthouse while reporters shouted questions about the criminal investigation surrounding her husband. The fairy tale had turned into a nightmare so slowly she never realized she was trapped until it was too late. By the time Daniel's empire collapsed under the weight of its own lies, Vanessa had already lost everything, her reputation, her freedom, and eventually her life. This time I told myself quietly as I sat on the edge of the bed, things would be different. The next 3 years passed in a strange mixture of calm preparation and quiet observation. Knowing the future was not the dramatic advantage people imagine it to be. It didn't give me unlimited power or wealth overnight. But it gave me something more subtle and far more valuable. Clarity. I knew which opportunities would grow into powerful companies. I knew which investments would collapse before they even launched. I remembered the names of executives who would rise to dominate entire industries, and the ones who would quietly disappear after disastrous scandals. Using that knowledge carefully, never too aggressively, never in a way that attracted suspicion, I built a career that looked impressive but not miraculous. By the time the third year arrived, I had already secured a senior analyst position at a rapidly growing investment firm. My salary was comfortable, my reputation steadily improving, and most importantly, my independence was unquestionable. Meanwhile, life at home continued along the exact path I remembered. My parents still adored Vanessa's beauty and charm, praising her for every minor accomplishment, while criticizing my practical, quiet personality as too serious. Vanessa herself remained exactly as I remembered, ambitious, competitive, and deeply resentful of the fact that people often described me as the more intelligent sister. In my first life, that resentment had only grown stronger after Daniel proposed to me first. I knew the moment was coming again. This time, however, I would be ready. The evening Daniel Hart arrived at our house felt eerily familiar, like stepping onto a stage where I had already performed the entire play once before. My mother had prepared an elaborate dinner after receiving a polite phone call from Daniel's assistant requesting a meeting. Vanessa spent nearly an hour choosing the perfect outfit, even though she pretended she had no idea why a billionaire entrepreneur would want to visit our modest suburban home. I watched the performance quietly from the sidelines, remembering how nervous I had been the first time this happened, how carefully I had tried to make a good impression on the powerful stranger sitting across the table. This time, when Daniel finally walked through the door, I felt nothing but a calm curiosity. He looked exactly the same as I remembered, tall, composed, with the kind of controlled charisma that made people instinctively trust him. But now that I knew the truth behind that charm, the subtle signs of calculation were impossible to ignore. The way his eyes lingered on people just a second too long, as if measuring their value. The way his smile never quite reached the corners of his eyes. Halfway through dinner, he turned toward me with the same confident politeness he had used years before and said, "I've been following your academic work. You have a remarkable mind." My parents nearly glowed with pride. Vanessa's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Later that evening, just as the first time, Daniel asked to speak with me privately in the garden behind the house. The air was cool and quiet, the distant hum of traffic drifting faintly through the darkness as we stood beneath the soft yellow light of the patio lamp. In my first life, this moment had felt overwhelming, the attention of such a powerful man focused entirely on me. Now it felt almost routine, like watching a scene unfold exactly as expected. Daniel spoke calmly about ambition, partnership, and the kind of life he envisioned building with someone intelligent and capable by his side. He described the opportunities that would come with his wealth, the influence we could wield together, the extraordinary future waiting just beyond the horizon. When he finally asked the question I already knew was coming, "Would you consider marrying me?" I almost laughed at how carefully rehearsed the moment felt. For a long time, I simply studied his face, remembering the countless headlines I had seen about him years later. Fraud investigations, regulatory crackdowns, financial manipulation hidden beneath layers of shell companies. In the end, my answer was simple. "No," I said quietly. Daniel blinked once, clearly surprised. In my first life, my refusal had shocked him because almost no one ever said no to him. Now I saw something different in his reaction, a flicker of irritation beneath the polished calm. "May I ask why?" he said politely. I considered telling him the truth, just to see his reaction. "Because I've already seen how your empire collapses. Because I know the crimes you'll commit to protect it." Instead, I simply smiled faintly. "Because I prefer building my own life," I said, "not standing beside someone else's." For several seconds, Daniel said nothing. Then he nodded slowly, masking his frustration behind a professional smile. "A shame," he said. "I admire your honesty." The next day, exactly as before, Vanessa approached him herself. Watching my sister accept the proposal I had rejected felt strangely surreal, like witnessing history repeat itself through a glass wall. Vanessa was radiant with excitement, basking in the attention and luxury that surrounded Daniel's world. My parents celebrated as if our entire family had just won the lottery. Friends and relatives congratulated Vanessa endlessly, while quietly suggesting I must feel foolish for giving up such an opportunity. This time, however, their words didn't bother me. I had already seen the ending of the story. I knew how quickly the glittering dream would begin to crack. For the first year after the wedding, everything unfolded exactly as people expected. Vanessa appeared in magazines wearing designer gowns. Daniel's company announced record-breaking profits. They attended charity galas, international conferences, and private island vacations that filled social media with carefully curated images of wealth and happiness. To outsiders, they looked unstoppable, a perfect symbol of modern success. But I knew where to look for the cracks. I recognized the subtle warning signs years before the rest of the world noticed them. The sudden changes in executive leadership, the complex financial restructuring Daniel quietly implemented to hide mounting losses, the aggressive expansion strategies designed to mask deeper problems in the company's core technology. By the time investigative journalists finally began asking questions, I had already moved my investments far away from every company connected to Daniel Hart. The scandal exploded 2 years later. Regulators uncovered fraudulent accounting practices buried beneath Daniel's global network of subsidiaries. Investors filed lawsuits. Government agencies launched criminal investigations. Within months, the empire that once seemed invincible began collapsing piece by piece under the weight of its own deception. And at the center of it all stood Vanessa, suddenly transformed from glamorous billionaire's wife into the unwilling face of a national scandal. The first time she came to see me after the investigation began, she looked nothing like the confident sister who had once gloated about marrying the man I rejected. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her makeup hastily applied, her eyes red from nights without sleep. She sat across from me in my office, gripping her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. "You knew," she whispered hoarsely. "You must have known something was wrong. That's why you refused him." I studied her quietly for a moment before answering. In another life, I might have tried to comfort her, to soften the truth with sympathy. But I had already learned the cost of pretending ignorance. "I didn't know," I said calmly. "I just trusted my instincts." Vanessa stared at me as if the words were a cruel joke. Outside the tall windows of my office, the city stretched endlessly into the distance, glass towers reflecting the afternoon sunlight like mirrors. Somewhere out there, reporters were still chasing Daniel Hart's story, documenting the fall of a billionaire who once seemed untouchable. But for the first time since my strange rebirth, I realized something important. This was no longer my story at all. I had stepped off that path long ago. And this time, I intended to keep it that way.